Damn girl, look at you. You look so cute. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm coming at you with some of my top 5-star reads. Now I don't know if these are all of my 5-star reads. I really tried to stare at my bookshelf and let my 5-star reads gravitate towards me because my brain is the size of a peanut these days and I can barely remember anything. And before you're like, Mercedes, you should just have a Goodreads so you could remember all of these things. Yeah, that would make sense. I haven't been able to fully commit to Goodreads yet. I feel like I'm just better verbally talking about books rather than typing out reviews, but I could just put a star rating on Goodreads, really. This is my stack of 5-star reads that I have so far. It's a mixture of fantasy, thriller, and romance. Some of these books are a part of a series, and I will tell you which books those are and how I felt about the series overall if it is a completed series. Before we get into my 5-star reads, I should tell you how I decide what is a 5-star read. I'm not really the type of reader who's looking for like grammatically correct sentences. I'm not even looking for a literary masterpiece. My 5-star reads are defined by the way the book makes me feel. So if I am like giddy, if I'm like kicking my feet, if I am in the book, I want to feel like I'm a fly on the wall in these characters' life. Like I'm literally there in the story. I feel whatever emotion it is, whether it's happy, sad, excited, in love. Like I want to feel those things. And that's what makes me define my 5-star read. They're purely based on vibes. Starting off strong with Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. When I read this book, I was just so invested. I was so giddy. I was kicking my feet, screaming. I cried in this book and I just was so invested in this storyline. I have read Iron Flame. It is a 4-star read for me, but Fourth Wing was better in my opinion. I'm going to try to describe all of these books with the least amount of information possible because I believe going in books blind is the best way to do it. And I know like defining tropes or like telling you what the storyline is about almost takes away a certain aspect from reading. Fourth Wing is a fantasy romance. The first book, I don't believe, is super heavy on the fantasy. However, the second book really starts pounding in the fantasy world. I do think Fourth Wing is a good book for romance readers looking to get into fantasy. And I know when Iron Flame came off, it did lose a chunk of the fan base. That's going to happen with any fantasy series. You kind of slowly start to lose readers the more the books come out. I think that's what's happening with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. The storyline is still really good. It is a fantasy romance. It does get heavier in the fantasy the more you move on into Iron Flame, but even if you just read Fourth Wing, I still think it's worth it. Coming up next, we have How Does It Feel by Janine O'Reilly. This should not be a shocker if you have been following me from my very first viral video. It was over this book. This is the republished version of it. You might know it as this, How Does It Feel? And this is the new cover and published by Bloom. I have never felt the way I felt by the end of this book. And if you've seen this video, then you know that this book made me really feel some type of way. The second book to the series, What Did You Do, has been released only on ebooks. So like your Kindle, you can read it on your iPad, anywhere where you can get an e-copy of the book. It has been released, but the book, the physical book itself, won't be released until June. So I haven't really talked too much about What Did You Do, but this is about How Does It Feel. Completely and utterly flabbergasted. It is a darker fantasy. It kind of starts off a little slow. You're not quite sure where the story is going or how it is even defined as a fantasy, but there is a point in the book where it does switch, and once it switches over, girl, you're like, oh shit, you're buckled up for the roller coaster ride. Coming at you with Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Meyer. This book, I like to say, is a mixture of a rom-com meets fantasy meets The Office. If you're looking for like a serious fantasy, this book is not for you. But if you're looking for something that is lighthearted, you want to have a good time, you want to laugh, you want to kick your feet, this is the book that I would recommend to you. Do you have to enjoy fantasy to be able to enjoy this book? I think a little bit. I think just a smidge. It's not heavy in the fantasy, but there's enough elements of it that if you just don't care for fantasy, you won't like this at all. This is also part of a series, but the second book has not been released yet. I believe it is coming out this year in September 2024, which I can't wait to read. I can't wait to jump back into this world because again, I was just so giddy. And all of the books that we were just talking about were the first book in fantasy series. However, I have 2 books that are 5-star reads that are the second book in fantasy series. And we're going to kick it off with The Ballad of Never After. This book makes the series. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. It is a 3-book series, and this makes the whole series. Good Lord. I wish there was another word for series, because how many times can I say that without it sounding so redundant? The genre of this book is a YA fantasy, and the tension between the main male character and the main female character was where it was at. It's them wanting something so bad, but the stars just don't align, and it is so good. This book leaves you desperate for more. Now, the third book, A Curse for True Love, has been released, and I don't have nice things to say about it, if I'm honest. So I'll refrain because we're only talking happy vibes right now. I love this book. Moving on to another book that is the second book in a series, we have Two Twisted Crowns. This is a part of the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillick. The first book is One Dark Window. I really enjoyed One Dark Window, but Two Twisted Crowns is the way you end a duology. It is a duology. It's just the 2 books. This is the last book. This is all you get, and then it's over. It's done. They're gone, and you just have to move on with your life. Like, you didn't read just the most phenomenal book ever. The way One Dark Window pulls you in as a reader and the way it delivers in Two Twisted Crowns was just everything I live for as a reader. It just concluded perfectly. The build up, the tension, the conclusion, everything about this was where it's at. This is kind of like I don't want to say it's a dark fantasy, but it has like almost like a Gothic vibe to it. The woman on the cover is standing in front of a misty forest. That's kind of like the vibes. It's like if I was watching it on film, it would for sure have like the heavy faded filter over it. Like everything is just like gloomy and dark, like a Gothic fantasy. That concludes our fantasy 5-star reads. We're going to move into thriller 5-star reads, and we're starting it off with a very popular thriller queen, Freida McFadden. This is Never Lie by Freida McFadden, and I screamed. The criteria I look for in my thriller books is I want to try to guess the ending, but I never want to be right, and I want to scream by the end of it. And I sure did, girl. Most of Freida McFadden books definitely do catch me off guard, and I love that. That's why I love Freida McFadden. She's one of my favorite authors, but this book specifically, I could have never guessed. I could have never guessed. Now we have Look Closer by David Ellis. I gotta stop saying I enjoyed this. No shit, girl. It's your 5-star reads. This is a perfect October book to read. This is like, if you're looking for thriller books around Halloween time, I'm gonna recommend that you read this because this takes place around Halloween time, and it's almost like a true crime type book, but not really. It flips back and forth between the present and the past. What you have is the crime taking place and the detectives trying to figure out what happens, and then it flips back into the past and kind of everything that built up to the crime itself. And it is twisty, it's turny, it's unpredictable. There is a slight aspect of spice in here, during one of the spicy scenes, the guy who was in the spicy scene said some of the most fucked up things I have ever read in a book. And I'm not talking dirty talk, okay? If you read it, I need to know if you can guess what. It's one sentence specifically that I was like, what the fuck did I just read? Moving on to another thriller queen, we have Lucinda Berry, Keep Your Friends Close. Oh my god. Another book where I wanted to be able to guess the ending, but didn't, because who thinks of these things? How is this possible? How did you think of this, Lucinda Berry? That's what I want to know. Like, how did you, like, sometimes I think thriller authors just are like, what would fuck them up the most? Now we're going to slowly transition into romance. I say slowly because this is a romance, but it's also a thriller at the same time. We have Verity by Colleen Hoover. This book will leave you thinking about the plot for days after. Even now, almost, it's been over a year since I've read this book, and I still am not sure. I'm still not satisfied because it's so open-ended, and you have to, as the reader, define what you think really happened in this book. Another romance that is also kind of a thriller, very suspenseful, we have Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This is a darker romance, so keep that in mind. It does have a trigger warning. There's also eerie thriller suspense vibes, and I loved that. I ate it up, and I just was so, like, this was a book that I started way too late in the night. I was like, I'll just read a few chapters of it and I'll be on my merry way. No, I stayed up until 4 a.m. reading this book because I started and I couldn't stop because it starts guns blazing. There's no, like, you know, what's that meme on TikTok where it's like, what happened to hello? That's this. Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. Sticking to the darker romance themes, I have Kid by Jessie Hall, which also has a trigger warning to it. And I just do want to go ahead and say real quick, how does it feel? Has a trigger warning as well. And if there is anything that you find specifically triggering in any of your books, please be sure to check your trigger warnings. Kid by Jessie Hall. Love this book. It might be, like, if I had to narrow my 5-star reads down to just 5, Kid would be in the top 5 for sure. I really loved the banter between the characters and the realness and the dialogue of the story. And a reason that I'm starting to like dark romance is because it is more real, it's more relatable, and I love seeing thoughts that I've had in my head or things that I've been through in my life translated into writing because it just makes me feel less alone. Now, just because something is considered dark romance doesn't mean that it has this crazy over-the-top spice. I've kind of seen the boundaries between that blur. There is spice in Kid, but it's not like Hunting Adeline. Is some dark romance where the spice is over the top, but that is not the baseline for dark romance. Another book that is considered a dark romance, Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This damn book is so good. It is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the trauma, the traumatic event happening. The second part is the part where I related to the absolute most is life after. And it is really, like, I just resonated with it. I read this on my Kindle, and if I go through my highlights that I have for this book, there's so many of them because life after trauma is just weird. It's an awkward transition period trying to adapt to surviving, and this book is that experience put into words. Part 3 is hope, that, you know, you keep putting in the work and one day maybe it'll get better, and that's why I love this book so much. Now I'm gonna end it off with 2 fluffy romances, I guess you could say. We have Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I love the dynamic between the two love interests. She is a wedding planner. He is a florist. I'm sorry, that's perfect. But he's a grumpy florist. And he, like, I sometimes reading like a grumpy sunshine trope, and I wouldn't necessarily consider this a grumpy sunshine trope because I wouldn't consider her to be like sunshine or super sunshine. Sometimes in that trope with a grumpy main male character, it can sometimes be cringy. It can sometimes be a little too over the top and unrealistic. Not with this book. I felt like he was a real man. It's also a second chance romance, which I'm starting to devour second chance romances. They're so good, and I really, really enjoyed this book. Now, this is my last 5-star read that I have for you today. And that is Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. This is the last book in the Knock Mountain series. There are 2 books previous to this. This is for sure the best book out of the series, hands down, no question about it. I do know the first book is a little slow. It's a little hard to get into, and the second book, it gets better. The second book was my 5-star read for a while until this bad boy came along and knocked it right out of the water. I guess this could be considered a second chance romance as well. Do you have to read the books in order? I'm gonna tell you, yes, there's an overarching theme in all 3 books that I think if you read them out of order, you're going to be confused, or the storyline's not going to have the full impact. When this book was over, when I finished it, I was staring into oblivion because it's done. It's over. My friends are gone. They're living their lives in their little book world, and I don't get any more of them. This is it. I felt like, you know, I was having a breakup with a friend. Like they were moving states and I'm never gonna see them again. That's how I felt by the end of Things We Left Behind, and I miss them. I don't think that's not every 5-star read that I've ever read. Those are the ones that I have for you today, and this is the part where I remind you that reading is subjective. Just because I felt really strongly about these books doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to feel that way at all. And just because you may not have enjoyed any of these books doesn't mean that it's not worth the hype, or doesn't mean that other people weren't able to enjoy them, or that there's anything wrong with the people who really enjoyed them. Are any of these books your 5-star reads? If not, what are some of your 5-star reads? Because I'm always looking for more recommendations. On my TikTok account, Book Club Wannabe, I do have reviews separate for all of these books. Some of these books I also do have before, during, and afters for. So if you want more of like an inside look on what the books have to offer, the type of book reviewer I am is I really try to keep things based on the way the book made me feel. I really try not to give too much away about the plot. I really just want to convey to you that that book made me feel some type of way. And if you're looking for these feelings, maybe read this book. So if you want more information on that, feel free to check out my TikTok account at Book Club Wannabe. And if it disappears into the oblivion, I will continue making content on YouTube and also on Instagram, which my Instagram is at Book Club Wannabe _. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourself and drinking your damn water. Love you. Bye.